Hey, everybody. Kevin Furman here. We're back at it with the second week of our book in our series this month. It's the Self Esteem Repair and Maintenance Manual, written by David Brooks and Rex Dalby. We're going to talk about chapters 3 and 4 this week. And a little tip: 4 is not a very long chapter. So I'm going to talk a lot about chapter 3, and we'll kind of get into it. So if somehow you landed on this video right away, this is E3LC is the name of the company. We are a leadership training and coaching business, and so we help people coach to success and to optimal productivity as opposed to just functional. And we also work on leadership training. We develop systems for training leaders and from all ages, actually from teenage on up. So that's a snippet. The E3 part is the overriding theme of what we do and how we view teaching people. And there are three categories in there, and that's the three E's, and it's effective with people, efficient with things, and encouraging with myself. So what we're doing in this book series is kind of working on each one of those three areas with a book, kind of highlighting a concept with a book that applies to that area. And we happen to be in the third section of the encouraging with myself section. And so this self-esteem repair and maintenance manual does a really good job of being very, very small, to the point, right? It's not full of a lot of theory. It is written by psychologists, but it doesn't get into psychology as a thing. Like it just talks about practical things you can do to repair self-esteem. Right. So anyway, that's it. So we're on chapter 3, and it's called Language: The Power, Discovering the Power of Self-Talk. So the idea of self-talk is not new. I've been hearing about that my whole life, and I honestly have had sort of a off and on relationship with the concept. Unfortunately, right? And when I first heard about it, I was pretty skeptical. As a young kid, I was pretty skeptical of a lot of things because life had kind of thrown a lot of curveballs my way, and so I was, like nothing was gonna fix it. It was sort of, now that's a pretty strong statement, but it was pretty rough, and I wasn't really buying into that I had any control of what was going on around me. I thought I was at the whim of circumstance. And as I got a little older, I realized, well, maybe that's not true. Maybe it's not circumstance. Maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe I have something to say about it. And that began this whole journey that I've been doing for 3 decades now of discovering what it means to be human and discovering how I can change the path of my future. And so this book this chapter of the book actually has a similar theme in that sense, and that's why I'm bringing that up. So I'm just here to say, first, right off the bat, you do have power to change your future. You do have something to say about how things are going to go, and you know what? Circumstances probably will get in your way, but that doesn't have to stop you. Right? It may throw hurdles at you. It may throw a gust of wind your way, or whatever analogy you want to use, but it doesn't mean you quit, right? It doesn't mean you give up. Just because something's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. In fact, sometimes I've heard it said that the harder the obstacle, the more worth the thing you're trying to do is, which is very grammatically poor, but nonetheless, that sentiment, idea of, hey, if recently a friend of mine, another coach friend of mine, mentioned in a meeting we were having that, when you say you want something from the universe, so to speak, you say, I want to do X, I want to create this in my life. Well, life has a way of throwing in obstacles to just test your resolve, to see if you really want it or if you're just talking and making a wish, right? So what that a lot of that has to do with what's going on up here, right? It actually doesn't have much to do with your circumstances. Now, eventually, you change your circumstances, so it's not all up here, but it starts here, and that's what this chapter is all about. So, okay, I stop just kind of espousing, but so what the guys do in this chapter, they use this analogy of, you have this kind of a self-esteem slide. It's like in a park. You're in a park and you see kids going down the slide, and so they had this thought of, like, okay, as a visual, at the top of this self-esteem slide, you're kind of like a baby. You're sort of like a baby who just says, I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to learn how to walk. Doesn't matter how many times I fall down. I'm not going to give up. I'm just going to sit here and say, well, I guess walking isn't for me. And that's kind of the example they start with. Babies don't do that. Babies strive, right? And with my own kids, even I had one of my kids scooted. They didn't really crawl. She actually liked to scoot around. She would kind of sort of halfway sit up and with one leg push, the other leg tucked underneath her, and she would scoot around as opposed to crawling around. And I have a feeling she really liked the speed of it, right? She just that's how she got around. She was very different in that sense from a lot of kids who tend to crawl as opposed to what she did. So anyway, kids find their way. It doesn't, they just find their way. They just figure out a way to do it, and they don't care what they look like. They don't care if it's like everybody else. They figure it out, and they see everyone else walking, so they well, I got to figure this out. So they eventually kind of get up and they figure out to walk. And when they fall, because they do, and that is a metaphor for failure in our lives, or things that don't go as well as we want them to. And it doesn't have to be a stopping point, because if you look at a kid, yeah, they may wail a little bit like they got mad about it, but then they get up and they try again, right? So that's a good metaphor that to keep in mind about how things work. It's not going to be just a smooth paved road. When you say I'm going to wherever you're going, there's going to be stoplights, there's going to be detours, there's going to be construction, there's going to be a change, there's going to be, you have to wait, you're going all kinds of things that are apt analogies for how things actually work in this messy, crazy world we live in. All right. So anyway, so they talk about that, and so they get to that, and they say, well, look, if you think of the slide, right? As you go down the slide, you start to use more thoughts in your head. You say things to yourself that are more quote negative, right? I'll never amount to anything. I can't do that. I'm a loser. It's never worked. Why should I even try? Like all those kinds of thoughts and things like self doubt, and or then you begin to like pile on. You start to slide down the slide, and they like the slide thing because the more you do it, the faster you move down to the muck at the bottom. Right? Just pretend there's like mud right at the bottom, and you're down there in the mud, just giving up. You're just like, I can't do anything anymore. Right? So to not land in the mud, you can do something about that. There are guardrails, right? You can grab on and stop yourself. And that's a point they mention. They didn't get into a lot with like details like, well, how do I do that? But they did mention it, and they say you can, and it is true. I agree because I've done it. All right. So the one thing they do also say is, look, everybody kind of wakes up one day and they just don't feel their top, right? They don't feel like they're on top of their game. They're just sort of got what they said, the blahs, right? And it goes away after a while. It's a mood, it's a feeling. It's not reality. It's just our bodies. Sometimes you didn't sleep as well. You didn't eat right. You had more on your mind than normal. Whatever, right? Lots of things can add to this feeling of like, oh boy, like weight or the blahs. And then you go about your day and it kind of goes away. The problem is if you feed into that and just, oh yeah, this is going to be a horrible day, and then it's a horrible day. I'm not going to go heavy into this. I'll mention this. There are other books that talk about that specific thing. When you say something and tell your brain this is how it is, your brain, your subconscious mind actually will activate things to make it become real. So you got to be very careful what you speak to yourself, and that's going to be another book that's going to come up probably next year about the subconscious mind. And so anyway, they don't go too far into that, but they do kind of hint at that sort of idea. And this book was written about 30 years ago. So there's been a lot more research done in the last 30 years about the subconscious mind and the power of suggestion and power of affirmations and all that. So anyway, speaking of affirmations, one of the things they kind of hit right away is this: what you say to yourself, your personal language, is what you believe, and what you believe is who you are. Now, we could pick that apart and disagree with wording or whatever, but I think the basic sentiment would be agreed upon by many, many, many people that talk about this and really delve into this. So anyway, there's that, right? So if you want to think about staying at that top of the slide where you have little fear of failure or rejection, and just moving forward with your goals and dreams, you're going to have a better time of getting there, right? But if you kind of say, well, you know, I just, why bother? It's a waste of time, etc., etc. Right. So anyway, they one of the authors shares a little thing, a little anecdotal story about a man who actually uh, you have to reach out with. Okay, it's this analogy of like we're in a tree, right? Just take it, right? We're in this tree, and everything you want is like fruit hanging from the branches of the tree. So you want the fruit, you want the cool stuff that you want in your life, but it's out on those branches, and they don't look too stable. From where you're at, next to the trunk, sitting on a thick branch here, but there's no fruit here, right? You're safe, but there's no fruit. So you're existing, you are safe, but you're not really getting what you really want out of life. And that is something I'm very interested in helping people find is what do you really, really want? Okay, let's get that. We're here one time. Let's get what we really want, right? So he just says, it's like people who don't want to go out on the branches. They're afraid of falling. They're afraid of getting hurt. They're afraid of failure, right? Those are all the same kind of thinking. And so, unfortunately, too many people, say things like, and this is, I have to say this, they don't want to go for what they really want because um, it's safe where they are. They're doing a job, or they have a position that's not necessarily fulfilling them or very satisfying to what they really, really do want to try in life. But they say, "Hey, it's secure and it's only 9 to 5, and I've got great benefits." Right? And man, I hear that one a lot. I got great benefits. Okay, that's great. How's your life? Right? I mean, if your life is all about your benefits, okay, then I guess that's what you want. That's great. That's great. I'm not too sure people on their deathbed. Um, okay, that's a bad thing to say. I'm just saying, at the end of your life, one of the regrets is that it's big in people's minds is they didn't go for what they really wanted. They settled. They settled for the okay or good life as opposed to really going for the great or amazing life. And I don't want to be one of those people. If you don't, it's worth thinking about. That's really worth thinking about. That right there. Just that idea. How do you want your life looking back on to be? Okay, so I'll leave it at that. And then there's a quote by Whitaker. So, of all sad words or tongue or pen, the saddest are these. It might have been. So yeah, the whole idea of regret, right? Living with no regrets. That would be a great life, right? So then they kind of want you to delve into it. So they get into this whole thing of like, okay, what do you want to do? What is it you used to say, I want this in my life, that you've given up on, that you put aside? Like, well, I'll do that later. I'll get to it when I can. And I certainly have done that. There have been things that I put aside um, for circumstance, and okay, I did. Now I can live with regret that I did, or I can say, well, am I still committed to that? Okay, how can I do it now? Let's do it now. Right? I know for me, what's becoming a big like draw is traveling. Traveling and meeting people and learning from other cultures. That's a becoming a very big draw for me. And so I'm working on that. I'm working on how I can design my life so I can travel a maximum amount once a month somewhere. Right? That's my ideal right now. Is I go somewhere once a month and learn from a different culture for the next few years. Right? Wouldn't that be fun? I just find that to be fun. Now, to some people, that sounds exhausting. It sounds, way too far out of their comfort zone. Understandable. That's me. That's where I am at this point in my life. I wasn't there for a long time. I was okay with not traveling. I was okay with taking care of family and handling responsibilities and all of that. But honestly, I did want it. I just knew it wasn't in the cards, so I tucked it away. I settled for a while. Yeah, I'm not doing that anymore. Just not. I'm not gonna do that. So anyway, speaking of that, they say, look, list the things that you were gonna do, but you're not doing it, and um, then say why. Why aren't you pursuing them? And it's not flimsy excuses like, well, I got great benefits, so I can't take off of work. That, I mean, it may be true, but is that really the reason? Or are you just afraid that you won't get it if you try? That's the real reason, right? They're talking about those reasons. So they say list those. Okay, great. Um, Now, this whole thing of self doubt and not trying, they say are the early stages of the slide, actually. So you might think, wow, that's pretty rough. No, it's actually, you're going for it. And then kind of the next stage is self doubt. Man, I'm not, nah, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm fine. I don't need to go out to those branches. I don't need to stretch myself. I'm doing okay. So they bring this up. Look, it's not only okay to fail, it's necessary to fail. And that's a point at which I have to, again, I'm going to talk about me for a second. I certainly thought that, or I wanted to believe that, but I didn't act like that. I didn't act as though I knew it was necessary to fail. I was still trying to avoid failure, but still going for things, right? So I have gone for certain things. My career, I changed. There were things I did that I went for that I really wanted, and I got them. And I'm still actively doing a lot of those. But for a long to too long, I was acting, I was going towards it, but I was still holding back because of the fear of failing, as opposed to just failing and learning. Now I'm in a phase of my life where I want to learn. I want to learn. I want to get better. I just want to learn. So I got to go for things. Doesn't go well. Okay, right? Like this series, I'm just going for it. I don't have a big production, as you can tell. This is not a big deal. It may turn into that. It may not. It may always be this format. I don't know yet. I'm still experimenting with it. I'm still having fun doing just this, just talking about this stuff. I think it's great. Okay, their next thing in the book is they talk about Abraham Lincoln as an example of failure, 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 win. Right? So that kind of another way to think of it is the overnight success of Abraham Lincoln getting to the presidency. Well, he failed in getting elected to many offices, failed in relationships, lost a couple sons. I mean, he there were a lot of just devastating things that happened to him, and yet he became one of the most important presidents of our country. So all those failures taught him the lessons to become the great man he became. Something to think about, right? So you won't learn those lessons if you don't have failure. So how do you be a great person or have great results without that foundation of learning? That's a really interesting point, and I'm kind of talking to myself right now because I think that's a really good way to think of it. And the biggest thing is they say we cannot overemphasize the reality that to experience a failure is not to be a failure. You can fail at something and be successful because you get up, you learn from it, and you adjust course and move. That's success. That is not being a failure, right? You can experience a failure. You can try something that doesn't get the result you want. That's another way to say failure, right? And I'm not trying to mince words. It's a different mindset. Yeah, it was a failure, but I look at those things now after all this time of working with this is that's that was an outcome I wasn't expecting or wanted. What can I learn from it? Okay, let's adjust. Here's how that might have gone better. Let's try something a little different. Or that avenue is not going to work. Different avenue. Let's go. Right? Rather than, well, didn't work, I quit. Right? And really that's the only way you can really quote fail is to quit at anything. Then I thought. Speaking of that, Robert Kennedy quote: "Those who dare to fail greatly can only those who dare to fail greatly can ever achieve greatly." So anyway, there's a lot in there to be thinking about. So they went back to the baby thing. They don't give up. They just keep going until they walk. They don't give excuses. Every once in a while they bump their head, get mad, and then they get up and walk again. All right. So they keep going back to that because it is a good example of how we can move forward with our lives and realize that we just keep trying. We learn, we adjust, we go. We learn, we adjust, we go. We may fall down. Okay, let's learn it from it, adjust, and go again. Fall down again, get up. fall down, get up, fall down, get up. You just get up. Being successful is getting up. And how fast you get up will determine how fast you get to success. That's my little 2 cents. That is not in the chapter, but it's very much related. Then another, yeah. So let's see. Oh yeah. Okay. This was another point I wanted to bring up. So there are a lot of people who say, well, like, well, that's all great, but I can't help it. I just think negatively. That's the way I think. It's just automatic. I was raised that way. I can't get over it. And they say, and this is where I think, in my opinion, they had an opportunity here that they didn't flesh out, and that was they just said, yeah, it probably is a habit. It is probably something from your childhood. You grew up thinking that way. You did that. That's probably very true, but it can be changed. And that's their only point they make is, but it can be changed. Habits can be changed, and they are totally correct. I think they're completely correct on that. I think that's right, and you do that by daily work, talking to yourself in a positive, like a present tense positive, um, as though it already is true way. And this is another area where I struggled a lot because it felt like I was lying to myself. It's like, well, that's just a lie. That's not true. Right. And I don't want to be a liar. So I would fight this whole idea of affirmations and doing it every day, multiple times a day. I've really struggled with this one. All cards on the table here. I have struggled a lot with that up until recently, and so after reading a lot again and again and again about how powerful our minds are given the right information, I can't deny that it actually can work and it does work. So affirmations. It's not in here, but it's in a lot of books, and affirmations are pretty well known across the board in our society these days. So we'll just leave it at that. They work. They've been scientifically proven to work over decades now. So something to think about. But they can be changed. So if you have this automatic response of negative, won't work, can't do it, that's your automatic response no matter what. That's a learned behavior. That's another way to say it's a habit you created, right? You learned how to think that way. Now, you may not remember learning to think that way because it's been so long, but it can be unlearned. It can be changed. A new way of thinking can be inserted and adopted, and it will take a while. It's like baby steps. You're going to fall and stumble but you will gain traction. You will be able to scoot, and then you'll be able to kind of get up on your feet and scoot around with holding onto the furniture, and then you can let go of the furniture and you'll fall. You'll get up again, right? That's how it's going to be with the affirmation thing. That's been my experience with it, and now I'm walking with it, and sometimes running, but it took a long time for me because I was in that habit. I was in that same kind of boat. So I highly identify with it. And then they go with this version. I think there's a better version in an earlier series, but they go with the version of, if you have a negative self-talk, right, something that's quote negative, then just restate it in the opposite positive. Like, I am stupid. You, instead of that, you say I am smart. Now, there was another book we read recently that, or went through recently, that there was a killer killer suggestion, and it's not. It's just because that whole thing of like, well, I don't really believe that I'm smart if I've been telling myself I'm stupid for 30 years or whatever long it is, right? It's just going to fall flat. You can say, even though I feel stupid, I am smart. That changes everything. That changes the mood about it. It's you're not lying to yourself anymore. And those words, even if, even though, whatever, right? Those kind of words, when you add that into that mix, becomes, it's not a lie anymore. It's sort of accepting what's true, quote true now, or what is right now, and then saying, for the future, I'm going to do this. That's very powerful. So think about that in that list. Okay, so if you continue down this whole, I'm stupid, and you're just sliding down the slide, and you're kind of greasing it. You just keep pushing yourself down, and you're gonna fall in the mud really, really, really fast. So the thing is, when you get near the bottom of it, they talk about having a distorted self-image where no matter what you do, everything looks like a failure, mistake, problem, whatever, whatever. So it's actually not really true. Like, most people aren't just failures walking around. They may feel like they are, and many things may have gone not the way they wanted, but they aren't a failure waiting to happen, right? Their just mindset is stuck in a certain mode that creates circumstances that is not helping them. So they say, look, stop with the, you know, negative self-talk and just grab the guardrails and slowly move your way back up the slide. The other thing is something else important is that everybody kind of wants the short-term solutions to pain and anguish, like feeling pain. So there's drugs and things like that. Some people just ignore it, right? They just don't even address the issue. They pretend it doesn't exist, and that's cutting off a lot of their life, right? And they even bring up the ultimate example of a pain reliever as suicide. Like an interesting thing, they just kind of throw it out, like, "Yep, that's the ultimate one." And then right after they say, "Look, none of these are great solutions, and we don't advocate any of these things." But they're just saying it like there's this progression that it goes very quickly and spiral. It's like this huge spiral, and it can get very ugly. So you have to be very careful, right, with what you do. Um, so there, and they, once again, they say, look, you can stop and you can work yourself back up. So how you actually kind of, like, in a nutshell, how do you do that, right? And they say, look, you just consciously reject the negatives and accentuate the positives. And I'll say it a little bit differently: is you look for your wins. You look for what you're doing well. There's got to be something you're doing well. You're consistent, you actually have a dream, you have a goal. There are many people that don't, right? You have something you're striving for. In that in of itself is worthy of praise, because I've known too many people that really don't. You ask them and they're just like, yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. I don't really have anything on the plan. I'm just doing my thing and gonna retire. I don't know. I don't know what they're doing, but that's kind of their answer. And okay, and like, if you're great, you're great, cool, whatever, right? But I don't see the spark. I don't see the vibrancy of the way they speak or what they're them looking towards the future. It's just like, yeah, just playing this out, and then we'll see. Okay, that's not me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be always pushing for something, even if I achieve all the goals I have set right now, which are pretty big. I'm going to keep pushing. I'm going to find more. I'm going to keep growing and doing more things, because I think that is a life worth living. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to continue doing these guys, and we'll see about if at some point I get enough feedback on, like, well, hey, try this way, try it that way, or do something different. Okay, then I'll try something different. But right now, this format is okay. And I like walking through these books. It helps clarify things for myself, and I'm hoping to share it with as many people as I can. All right, so just take care of your attitude. All right, take control of it, take care of it, and do some self talk. Now, chapter 4 is actually, because we're doing two chapters at a time. Chapter 4 is like a page long, so it was sort of like a break chapter. It wasn't really a full chapter. They just said, okay, in the next chapters we're gonna do this. So it wasn't really a chapter at all. It was more just we're just gonna kind of review. It was a review and a page long review of what they did in the first three chapters. Okay. Well, anyway, we'll just leave it at that. That they did put things together well. I think they were trying to their chapters are labeled self-esteem, right? So it's SEL, and F is that one, and they came up with that. Let's look at the framework. What did we do so far, etc. No need to go over that again. So that's chapter 4. All right, so there's the two chapters for this week. Thanks for checking it out. Have a great time until I see you next time. Again, if you have questions, let me know in the chat, or you can email me at kfurman@e3lc.net. And you can check out the website. If you may be looking for coaching or leadership training, let me know. I'd be happy to help you out in any way I can. Take care. We'll see you next time.